Fans in South Carolina giving former President Trump a rock star's welcome yesterday at the Clemson, South Carolina football game in Columbia, South Carolina. Trump visiting Nikki Haley's alma mater and home state as she holds second place ahead of February's crucial primary.
Former presidential candidate Governor Mike Huckabee joins us now to react. Governor, great to see you here. Hope you had a great holiday. And look, this is quite a power move by 45. What message does this send to both Nikki Haley and the rest of the Republican field?
I think it sends the message that Donald Trump is in total command of the Republican primary. The never-Trumpers are doing their best to say that there's no way he can win. I'd look at things like this and the poll numbers that have been consistent for the past 12 months and say, I don't know there's any way he can lose. I mean, nobody, if you added all the other candidates together, they're still double-digit points behind him. I mean, that just says it all. And this reception that he got in Nikki Haley's home state, with her alma mater being one of the teams playing, I mean, that's stunning. You would expect that there'd be a little bit of sort of hometown pride coming for one of the candidates. But Donald Trump has dominated. And even when there were two South Carolinians, Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, he still had a commanding lead, and neither could cut into it.
So, Governor Huckabee, tell me why, because I think a lot of people are watching and they're saying this guy has 91 felonies against him. He's had everything thrown at him. He gets no good press, maybe except for, occasionally on this network. But why are people in those stands and across the country? We had a fight here at, what was that? I'm going to get it wrong. The
MMA, yeah.
Oh,
MMA.
UFC.
Yeah. Sports is not my thing, Governor,
UFC.
you know that. But he came here, he got the same sort of reception when he went to the MMA fight. Why are people still behind him?
Rachel, I think it's in part because for many Americans, he is us. Let me explain that. Donald Trump represents the people who feel like that the government has stepped all over them, who have used their power to quench their lives and to try to dictate to them. And Donald Trump is the guy that takes it over and over again. He keeps getting punched by the deep state and the establishment. People watch what happens, and they look at the enemies that he has. Who are they? Well, they're the people who run the alphabet agents in Washington, but who run those agencies to go after 70-year-old grandmothers who protested abortion clinics and do SWAT team raids on young fathers because somebody was after his kid. And yet they let Antifa people burn down police stations and beat up cops in cities all over the country, and they don't even get arrested. And people are sick of it. They remember when gas was cheaper, groceries were affordable. They remember when manufacturing jobs were coming back and the border was as close to secure as we've seen, and we were exporting energy instead of importing it. And they look at all that and they say, how come people hate Trump? Well, because he hasn't sold out to China. He is the one president who, instead of making money off being president, has lost money off being president. And so that's why I say that in many ways, he is us, the rest of America, who's sick of the way the government has trampled over every aspect of our lives.
Governor, you talk about what we remember, and then we wake up and look at a reality, who the president is now, Joe Biden, where we are, and the border, economy, national security, what's happening in Israel, what happened in Afghanistan. Our own Lucas Thomason had a chance to ask him, maybe if some of this going wrong is because he's too old to run. Let's listen real quick. Yeah, so what you see there is that, they ask him if he's too old. He says, no, that's stupid. Then they ask him about the latest polls. And just to give you an idea what those polls look like, Biden's at 46%, Biden's at 44%, Trump's at 26% in the latest hypothetical poll there. So it shows you that Trump is leading him. Why do you think that is?
Well, it goes back to what I said before. I think people look at their lives under Donald Trump and their lives under Joe Biden. And Joe Biden continues to insult half the country. He continues to say that all of these MAGA Republicans, well, that represents not just Republicans, but a lot of independents who kind of liked it when Donald Trump was president. Now, granted, Donald Trump still says things that cause people to go, oh, I wish he hadn't said that. And we all understand that. The only person who can beat Donald Trump at this point is Donald Trump. Otherwise, I think he's not only going to win the nomination, but I don't see Joe Biden beating him. And I want to add quickly, look, this isn't about how many candles are on his cake. although Joe Biden had so many candles that it was a 4-alarm fire in Washington, and Smokey Bear was called in to tell him not to ever do that again. But all that aside, it's not so much how many candles on his cake, it's how many candles are burning inside his head and whether he's up to the cognitive job of doing this job as president.
You laugh, but you cry.
Yeah, it's not about the age, it's about the cognition. You're right about that, Governor. You're right about so many things. We love having you on.
Thanks, Gov.
Thanks for joining us today.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.